What's up guys, Jake here. In this video, we're going to talk about an advanced options trading strategy called the poor man's covered call. And the poor man's covered call goes by many different names. You can abbreviate it to PMCC, or it's a leveraged covered call, or a diagonal call spread, sometimes called the fig leaf spread. But in reality, it's just a vertical spread. So if you want to trade these with your broker, make sure that you're approved for the option trading level that allows vertical spreads. Step 1 to the poor man's covered call is to understand the benefits of selling covered calls. If you don't know what a covered call is, this video is not for you, so check out these videos first where I go into examples and explain the details of selling covered calls. Step 2 is to understand LEAPS. What is LEAPS? You can watch this video, but LEAPS stands for Long-Term Equity Anticipation Security, and this is basically just a deep in the money call option that you've purchased at a far out expiration date. And all we're doing is combining these two to create vertical spreads, which basically simulates a covered call. So step 1, buy the LEAP, which is a long-term call contract that you're using as collateral. Step 2 is to sell a short-term call option to collect premium, and you're using the long-term call as collateral. What you're doing here is you're simulating a covered call. You don't actually own 100 shares, but if you have a deep in-the-money call option far out in advance, then you're basically simulating that you have 100 shares. Your broker, if you're approved for vertical spreads, will then let you start selling calls against it. And you're collecting the same amount of premium that people who actually own the 100 shares own, except if you have a LEAP and you're selling calls against it, you're only holding in equity a fraction of the amount, but you're still collecting the same premium as if you had 100 shares. So let's do an example because those are always the most helpful. And with Apple stock, the share price is currently $130. So in order to sell covered calls against Apple, true covered calls, you need to purchase 100 shares. That would equal $13,021. Now, this is a lot for some people with smaller account sizes. And maybe you have this much money, but to put all of your eggs in one basket is not good. You'd be sacrificing diversification in order to just sell covered calls on Apple. So by doing the poor man's covered call, you're not tying as much equity up into one stock. So let's do Apple as our example, and once again, we're going to buy our long-term call option first, and this is going to be deep in the money with a high delta value. Now, some YouTubers or other channels will say 70%, but I don't recommend that. You should definitely be going for a delta value of 80% or closer to 90%. The reason why is because if you get exercised and the delta isn't especially high, then you're not getting as much intrinsic value. And the math gets a little dangerous the lower you make this delta value. Now, the lower the delta value, the less you're tying up in collateral. But I highly recommend, and I'm not going to get into the math in this video, that you keep this delta value high, preferably above 80, closer to 90 if you can. And the higher the delta means the lower extrinsic value. This is implied volatility and time. This is your pay to play for having this options contract. So if you're purchasing a LEAP far in the future, then theta decay is going to be very low. How much you're losing in extrinsic value per day is very small, while you still have lots of time to sell calls against this LEAP. Now, what expiration should you go with? And some YouTubers might recommend 3 months. However, I do not think that is enough time. I'm going to recommend to you that when purchasing a LEAP, you should do at least 1 year, preferably 2 years. Now, why would you do this? The reason why is to give yourself some flexibility. Should this stock take a dip, you can then give yourself time for the LEAP to recover. You don't want to lose money on your LEAP. So if you purchase a LEAP that is 2 years or greater out in advance, then you don't necessarily have to hold it those 2 years. You could hold it 1 year, and if it's positive, you can sell to close it. However, if it's taken a dip and you want to give it a couple months to recover, you can get back above your cost basis so you're not losing any money on your LEAP. Additionally, if you hold the leap longer than 1 year, you'll pay favorable long-term capital gains, but if you sell it or exercise it in less than a year, you'll have to pay short-term capital gains. So a longer expiration date is going to cost you more in collateral, in premium tied up for the contract, which is why some people want to do a shorter time period, but once again, you're assuming more risk. Let's look at the option chain for Apple with the expiration date of January 20th, 2023. This is in 622 days. And if we look at the closest out-of-the-money strike price of 135, Apple is currently 130. It's telling us the premiums are about $18 or $1,800 to pay for it. Now, that $1,800 you're paying for is 100% extrinsic value. This contract is out of the money, so this is what you're paying to play. But we want to buy a leap. So on your broker, definitely switch it to show the Greeks, and then view all strike prices and start scrolling up. You want to find a deep in the money strike price that gives you a delta value of close to 90%. So when we look at the option chain on my broker, Charles Schwab, I'm seeing a strike price of 70 to get a delta value of 0.9 or 90%, and a strike price of 95 for a delta value of 0.8. For fun, let's just compare these two so you get an understanding. And what are you paying for this premium to get intrinsic value, and what are you paying to get extrinsic value? So a side-by-side comparison of these two different leaps, one with a delta value of 0.9, strike price 70, one with a delta value of 0.8 and a strike price of 95. So the premium for a delta value of 90 is $61.90, and the premium for the delta value of 0.8 is $4,000. So you can see this sliding scale game you can play, where if you lower the delta, the less collateral you're tying up. However, how much do you have in intrinsic value in this contract right away? It's the difference between the strike price and the current share price multiplied by 100. So intrinsic value for this contract is $6,000. You have this if you were to exercise it today. You would never do that, but it's nice knowing what intrinsic value you have locked in. So what is the remaining value, implied volatility and time? It's just $169. It's the premium you'd pay, subtract intrinsic value. So this is the most amount of money you can lose for paying to play by holding this leap for 2 years. It's a very small amount. However, when the delta value is lowered, so is intrinsic value, and extrinsic value increases. You're now paying $559 to pay to play over these 2 years. So it raises your break-even price, and if worst case scenario, your short leg is exercised and then your long leg is exercised, this is what you're giving up. You're giving up the extrinsic value if you have to exercise the contract early. Now let's compare these both to just doing an ordinary covered call by buying 100 shares of Apple. So for a delta value of 1, you bought the stock, the premium you're paying is just the share price, 130.21 multiplied by 100. So intrinsic value is the full $13,021. If Apple's share price goes down $1, your value of your stock goes down 100. So you're not paying any extrinsic value, it's 0. So you're not losing any extrinsic value should your stock get called away with an ordinary covered call. So let's look at that delta value of 0.9 and the premium we're paying of $6,190. That is less than half of what we would have to pay for the full price of the stock, $13,021. So by doing a leap to sell a covered call against it, you're only locking up less than half of the collateral. So let's go ahead and say that we want to go with the delta value of 0.9 and we're going to purchase this leap. So we're going to pay the premium of $6,190. Now next, now that we have the leap in our brokerage account, we can now start selling covered calls against it. Now, technically, they're not true covered calls. This is the poor man's covered call, but I'm going to keep saying covered call. So when you sell a covered call against your leap, you want it to be out of the money. Don't sell a call that's in the money because it'll get exercised. And you want to go with a low delta value, preferably 0.3 or less. And this means the contract has no intrinsic value. If it's out of the money, there is no intrinsic value, the difference between the stock price and the strike price. And you want a high theta decay. This is primarily how you're making your money, is the people who are paying to play with short-term call contracts that they're buying. You're selling against those people. So you want a close expiration of about 1 month or less. And after you sell to open this contract, the buyer is on the clock. They're losing theta every day. So once you've captured more than 50% of the value of this call that you sold, you might want to buy to close it. So if you can sell to open for, let's say, $100 for a 4-week contract, and you capture $50 in 1 week, then buy to close it. One, you minimize the risk of the stock price moving against you. But two, if you want, you can then roll it, and you can sell to open another call at a higher strike price or a lower strike price, depending on the price movements, in order to capture more theta value at a later expiration date. You would reset it for 1 month from the future. So let's go to the option chain to purchase our call against our leap, and we're looking for a delta value of about 0.3. So once again, let's switch it to show the Greeks, and I'm seeing a delta value here of 0.32. And that's a pretty good premium that we're getting for that strike price. Apple's current share price is 130 and the strike price is 134. I'm looking at call contracts for June 4th, which is 26 days in the future. So the buyers are bidding 165, the sellers are asking 169. We'll take the mid price to assume that's what we were able to receive in premium for selling this call. So how much can you make selling poor man covered calls? Let's do the math. So the collateral that we're locking up is the leap that we purchased. This is cash in our brokerage account that we then use to purchase the leap. And so we locked up $6,190. We then sold a call against it to collect premium, and we were paid $167. So to figure out what is your equivalent APY, annual percent yield, on your money for the time that you sold this call, do 167 divided by 26 days to get the per day, multiply it by 365 to get the annual rate, divide it by the collateral you locked up, $61.90. And if you were to sell this poor man covered call, you'd be getting the equivalent of 37.8% on your money over these 26 days. And that's just if you hold the call all 26. Remember, if you sold to open it and you capture most of the premium in the first week, then you can buy to close it, so you can sell another one and you can get this percent yield even higher. So making 37% on your money sounds awesome, but what if worst case scenario? What happens if you are assigned? Option number one, I just have to tell you, you can always roll your call that you sold up and out. However, I don't support this. If you're rolling your calls to avoid being assigned, then potentially you own a leap you shouldn't be owning long term, and you're selling calls on stocks that you shouldn't be selling. So once again, be very selective and picky which stock you want to purchase a leap on. It should be a good company that you have faith in 2 years from now will be appreciating in value. And don't sell a call against it if you think you're just gonna lose your stock or you're gonna lose your leap. So ideally, the stock price, you don't want it to go down because that hurts your leap, but you want it to be going sideways or up just a little bit. We'll do some scenarios where I explain the math. So if you're not rolling your call, then you might be assigned once the call expires in the money, and you'll have a negative 100 share position. So if your covered call or your poor man's covered call is exercised, you were forced to sell 100 shares to the buyer of the call contract, but you didn't have 100 shares, you only had the leap. So depending on your brokerage company, they might do one of two things. The first one is they'll just give you a negative 100 share short position, and this is very easy to get out of. Just go buy 100 shares of the stock. So think about this. If the share price is 134 and Apple goes to 135, then you were paid the strike price of $13,400. However, Apple is now worth, 100 shares is worth $13,500. So if you were paid the strike price and you now have a negative 100 position, just go buy 100 shares, they'll cancel this out, you'll be back at zero for owning stock in Apple. But remember your break-even price. If Apple goes to 135, you still collected that 167 in premium, so you're not negative value by selling 100 shares and then buying them back. You got to remember your break-even price is the premium you were paid plus the strike price for the contract. The third option is your broker will assign your long call, your leap. So both your short leg, the call you sold, and your long leg, the leap that you bought, they'll both be exercised. So the 100 shares that you're getting from the long call will be then sent to the short call. So let's go over the math, because I think this is kind of nerve-wracking to think about. But what if you were way off? What if you were way wrong about the call that you sold and Apple's share price shoots up to 150 in a single month? This is a huge price movement, but it is possible. So let's assume that it goes wrong and you're going to get both of your calls exercised. So for the long call, you're going to be calling away 100 shares from the seller in order to just give those 100 shares to the buyer of your short leg. So for the long call, the leap, you paid $6,190 for the premium. You're then going to have to pay the strike price, $70 per share. So total, you paid $13,190 to get your 100 shares of Apple, which is worth $15,000 now. So you are net positive on your leap because the share price of Apple went up. However, you need to then immediately send those 100 shares to the person that bought your short call. So with a strike price of 134, you receive the premium of 167. So you're going to be paid $13,400 by the buyer of your short leg, and you still get the premium. So your 100 shares that you got over here that you paid $13,190 for goes to somebody else who's paying you $13,567. So you net made $377. This is the worst case scenario, is you made $377. Now, this might not make any sense to you, but it's similar to selling a covered call. You can't be bad at selling covered calls. Like, you can't lose money unless you do something really dumb. But what's happening here is this you were paid $13,567, but you technically should have had stock that was worth $15,000. So you're losing value. You're losing close to $1,500 worth of value in Apple stock, but on dollars changing hands, you can't lose money if everything goes wrong. You still net made $377 over 1 month. So what's the best case scenario? The best case scenario is Apple appreciates in value just up to the strike price, so it stays out of the money. So let's do the numbers here. So the strike price of the call you sold was 134, and if the price appreciates to 133 or 133.99, then the leap is going to increase in value because you bought the leap when the share price was 130.21. So your leap is going to go up in value. You haven't exercised it, so it's not realized gains yet. But this is going to go up in value about $300. And then you sold the short call and was not exercised, so you were paid $167 in premium. Now, in your bank account, over this 1 month period, you net only made $167, but your leap appreciated $300 in value. You then get to sell another covered call for 30 days out, collecting more premium, and ideally your Leap is a good company, it's a good stock, it's going up slowly, predictably in value over time, and you're not losing it. But what if Apple's share price goes down? Let's say it goes down to $120 a share. That's a $10 per share drop. Well, then your call contract that you sold is going to expire worthless. You're going to collect the premium, $167. But your Leap went down in value. Once again, make sure that you got a good company and you have a far out expiration date to give this stock price time to recover. You need it to come back because your Leap lost about $1,000 worth of value in this 1 month. However, you were selling covered calls against it. So you were collecting this $167 premium, and that kind of softens the blow if your Leap goes down and then never recovers. But ideally that shouldn't happen. So over this 1 month, you net made in cash in your bank account $167. You didn't lose any money because you haven't sold your Leap for a loss yet. And that's it. There's really only 3 possibilities. Apple's share price goes way up. In that instance, you technically don't lose money. It goes sideways or slightly up but stays out of the money. You collect the premium. Or Apple's share price goes down. You collect the premium. You still hold on to that Leap. You're not selling it at a loss. You're waiting for the share price of the company to recover. So your Leap still makes you value. You sell more covered calls against it. Okay, sounds too good to be true. What are the risks of the poor man's covered call? And it's identical to the Leaps video that I made. So the risk is you're buying Leaps, and with Leaps, you don't own the stock. So you're not collecting dividends. If you were holding 100 shares for years at a time, you're collecting the dividends on the stock. Additionally, you are tying up a larger amount of equity than if you were just buying at-the-money call contracts. So would you rather buy a Leap on Apple for $6,000, or would you rather be buying 3 at-the-money call contracts distant in the future for $2,000 each? So it's a math equation, it's a balancing act where on the option chain you want to land as far as what you want to pay now for intrinsic value versus extrinsic value. Additionally, while holding a Leap, it can expire out of the money and you can lose 100% of the premium you paid for the contract. It's not impossible that Apple, worst case scenario in 2 years, does fall below the strike price that I chose. Additionally, when you buy Leaps, you're leveraging your money, so you can lose twice as fast, similar to you can gain twice as fast. So just remember that when purchasing Leaps. And number 5, similar to number 1 and number 3, is you don't actually own the stock. Should a worst case scenario happen and your stock, if you hold it, take a dip, you can always hold it and wait for it to recover over time. The example everyone loves to give is in the .com crash, Amazon was like $110 a share. A year and a half later, it had fallen to $7 a share. However, if you didn't sell it and you just held on to it, you'd be soaring high at $3,300 a share. So there is a value, there is a sense of security in owning the stock, and you don't get that from Leaps. But overall, if done correctly, the poor man's covered call can generate you a lot of passive income. The more that you study options and you learn the math and the game, the more interesting it is. How much can you squeeze out of these contracts? It's pretty cool. Okay guys, if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up so the algorithm knows it's good. In addition, consider sharing this video if you know anybody out there interested in options, selling covered calls. Maybe they want to learn about Leaps, maybe they want to learn about the poor man's covered call. If you have any comments or questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till next video, take care.